Hi, I'm Victoria Lansford. I've been a metalsmith for 25 years and I specialize in ancient techniques, including the technique of Russian filigree. And today I'd like to show you how to use Russian filigree powdered solder. I have a piece of filigree that I've just filled with filler wires into the frame, and I'm ready to solder it from the back. So I'm going to pick it up off the steel block I've been working on and put it face down on a compressed charcoal block. I have a jar of Russian filigree powdered solder that Rio Grande carries, and I'm going to put a little bit of distilled water that I have in a dropper bottle into the lid, get my flux brush wet, pick up a little of the solder and mix it. And the consistency I'm looking for is diluted but not too watery. So I'm just making kind of a thin paste. Now any solder that gets left in the lid can be put back in the jar and reused. It may need to be stirred just a little bit when it dries out, but it can just be rehydrated with the distilled water. It is really important to use distilled water because water in different areas has different minerals in it, and distilled water will not interfere with the flux properties. The solder is the same as an ancient recipe for Russian filigree using copper, zinc, bronze, and also includes borax to act as a flux. So with it already mixed in, I don't need to add flux to my piece. I'm going to paint it on the back of my piece and really concentrate it where the filler wires make contact with the frame wires. And I need to let this dry for just a few minutes, and that will prevent the flux from bubbling up and moving my wires around. I'm ready to solder the piece. A Russian filigree works best if it is soldered with a corona type flame, or a soft pillow of flame as some people call it. So I'm going to point the torch on the charcoal block and get that little pillow going, and then move it over to the piece. Because the wire does not conduct the heat excessively, I don't have to spend a lot of time heating the whole piece like I would if this were sheet. So I can concentrate mostly right in this area. It's important to think of heating the frame and letting the filler wires get hot by conduction, and that will help the solder flow not just into the filler wires but also attaching them to the frame itself. Sometimes people stop soldering a little too early because they're afraid of melting the wires. You won't see a big flash or a lot of mirroring because the solder is so fine, but if it still appears somewhat grainy, then it probably hasn't flowed yet and you need to keep going. And I'm ready to pickle. So I've pickled the piece and rinsed it, and now I'm going to give it what my students call the dreaded thumb test to see if all the filler wires soldered in. It's really common for some of the filler wires to tack solder in, and maybe not all of them. So I can tell that my top three here are soldered, but this little loop is still a little bit loose. The important thing is I have it soldered down here where the tail wires fit into this space. So I can continue filling this frame on my steel block, and then when I'm ready to turn it over and solder it from the back again where I've added more wires, I can add just a little bit of solder in that place that I know didn't completely solder to the frame and keep right on going. Now this solder flows like an easy solder and then afterwards behaves like a medium solder. It flows at 1150 and melts at 1200 degrees. So what happens is a lot of the zinc burns off, and when I go to perform subsequent solder joints, I don't have to worry about those wires collapsing or the solder reflowing excessively. If I need to reflow it, I can add flux to an area that has to be resoldered, and because the flux that's in it has already burned off and been used, so I would need to add flux. And I have to get it just a little bit hotter, just like with regular soldering, to make the same solder flow again. If you have any questions, please visit riogrande.com or call them at 1-800-545-6566. Thank you very much.